Hey Guitar Geeks, Guitar Guts back, and today I'm going to show you how to remove the active boost circuit from one of Squier's vintage modified Jaguar basses. First, let me explain why anybody would want to do this little surgery in the first place. A few years back when Squier first started really promoting the vintage modified line, one of the nice little upgrades on them were these Duncan designed pickups. These are two on one of the jazz basses that I have, and I think they sound great. I mean, we're talking around a $300 guitar here, so are they going to sound as good as a legit made in the USA Seymour Duncans or something from the Fender Custom Shop or DiMarzio? No, probably not. But for what they are, I think they sound great. They sound better than most of the stuff out there on the market under $500 or $600 to me. A very vintage vibe to them. And they made these for the Jaguar PJ bass as well, Duncan Design P in the neck position and Duncan Design Jazz in the bridge position. And I thought they sounded great. So I was needing a guitar to take to school for the kids to play a new bass. And I found one of these Jaguar vintage modified models, a PJ model, and it was pretty, not this one, it was pretty beat up. It was really filthy. One of the pickups didn't work on it because some of the wiring had come loose. I bought it, fixed it up. Wasn't very impressed with the sound of it. It didn't remind me of the ones that I had played before with the Duncan Design pickups on them. And these are just unlabeled Squier pickups. So I figured, well, they've put cheaper pickups in there, and so it's just not that great. And then they got the active boost circuit here. You know that on a normal non-active boosted bass, you'll have 3 controls right here, and then the jack goes in the front. But on this one, you've got 4 controls on the faceplate here, and the jack is over on the side of the guitar where you can't see it there. And the third knob down here controls the active boost. And I didn't think the guitar sounded very vintage at all. It didn't have a lot of the Fender flavor to it. It's very one-dimensional. And I thought that active boost, the only thing I could tell that it was doing was adding a little bit of boom to it, some volume, and kind of crackly at that. So I wondered, why would Fender do that? Of course, there's, they probably had to pay a little bit in royalties to Seymour Duncan to use his name, so unbranded pickups maybe, but I wondered why the step back in sound quality. And of course, you got to remember they're marketing these to beginning bass players more often than not. And if they're sitting in the store and the kid's picking up 3 guitars, and one of them has this active boost on it and it sounds louder than the other 2 guitars, then they're likely to go for that because it's just got more volume to it. And that's not really how you need to be getting the volume out of your bass setup. That's the job of the amplifier. There's a little knob on there called volume that you can turn up and get more volume out of it. But on the one that I was going to take to school, I thought, well, I don't like the battery circuit being in there. I don't like the idea that if the battery goes dead, and this is true, if the battery goes dead on these, you've got no signal whatsoever going to the amplifier. Your guitar is dead. So I thought, well, if I'm taking it there and leaving it for a couple of years, sitting around, the battery's going to go dead. Some student's going to leave it plugged in. It's going to run the battery down over the weekend. So I thought, well, I'll remove that active circuit just so I don't have to worry about the battery. Well, I was amazed once I took that active boost circuit out, how good these pickups sound. I mean, they, I don't remember exactly what the vintage modified P bass that was from Seymour Duncan Design sounded like, but this sounds pretty vintage P bass to me, and so does the Jazz bridge. It was amazing how much difference the removal of that active boost circuit made to the authenticity of those pickups. It was no longer just boom and volume. They actually had their voice back, their character. That vintage, throaty Fender bass sound. And so I'm going to show you how to remove that bass circuit, that boost circuit, in case you wanted to do this to yours. I think it improves the sound greatly. Now, if you're just in it for the volume and the boom, you might want to leave that hooked up. There's 3 screws that hold in this faceplate here, and you have to remove those. I've already done that. I'm going to wrap this up a little bit to keep it from banging on the finish and to keep any solder from dripping. When you turn this thing over, it does look like a mess. There's a lot of wires in here, and it can be kind of intimidating to look at to begin with, but it really, what you're doing to it isn't difficult at all. It's a pretty easy mod. It's kind of tight where you're working at here, but I can show you how to do it real quickly. Now, there's a few things that you don't need to mess with. One being the green wires that run between the volume, the second volume, and then the tone, which is actually the fourth knob on your faceplate. The active boost is in the center, but it is the last one that the signal runs through before it goes to the jack. The only real wires that you need to worry about is this yellow one, which is the one that's going to the jack, and it's leaving from the boost circuit, from the top of this little circuit board, and heading out toward the jack. And fortunately, Squier has provided us with plenty of extra wires, so you've got a little bit to play with there. And then there's one white that in this one, this was not true with the other one that I snipped this on, but in this one, it's braided up. Somebody has twisted it around the ground that's also coming off that circuit board. But this little white one right here is coming from the tone pot's middle lug, and that's kind of hard to see. It's down in here, right there. It's coming off the tone pot's middle lug and heading over to the circuit board for the boost circuit. Now, there are a lot of ground wires here that you don't need to mess with. You may as well just leave everything grounded the way it is, because that leaves the whole circuit grounded, including the boost circuit that you're removing. You might as well leave it grounded too, so there's no point in removing any of those. But you do have to remove this white that's going from the tone circuit to the active boost. Now, the difficult thing there is there's two wires there, if you can see that. There's one very small white wire, much smaller than the other one, that is the hot for this green wire that's running between the two volume pots and the tone pot. You don't want to mess with that one, and that's why I'm going to do something a little bit different than I normally would here. Instead of unsoldering that white wire right there, I'm going to clip it with a pair of snips. And that does two things. It keeps me from having to get down in there too often and heating that lug up, because I don't want the hot white coming from the volume to fall off that. Then I have to get down in there and try to solder that back in, and that's more work. So I'm just going to snip this white wire coming from the active boost to the tone circuit, the tone pot, with a pair of snips. I'm going to leave a little bit of length to it. I would get down real close, and I could do that. It's tight, but I could get down there. But what I want to do is I want to leave a little bit of that sticking out to remind myself or whoever else might work on this later that wants to reconnect that, where that white wire went. So I'm just going to snip that. There we go. No big deal. Just going to leave that hanging there. You might want to get in there and put a little bit of tape on that in case it got up against anything else. But since we're not going to strip the end of it, it's unlikely to interfere with anything else. But you could do that if you wanted to. So I'm going to snip that, leave that laying there. That way, if anybody gets back in here and wants to reconnect this later, they can see the end of this white wire that I just snipped hanging in the air, where I've snipped it loose, and they can see that piece coming off that tone pot, and they'll know that that goes back right there. It's a little bit of a clue I'm leaving for somebody if they want to work on this later and I'm not around. Also, when I snip the yellow wire here, the one that's going from the boost circuit to the jack, I want to leave a little bit sticking out of that as well, both as a clue as to where it went, and because if I ever want to put that back in, I don't want to be in here trying to solder to this little solder hole in the circuit board. I'd rather solder it back to the wire up here, just kind of twist those together and solder it back there. And since I've got plenty of wire, I'm going to do that. I'm going to leave a little bit of that yellow hanging off there, enough to strip later if I need to, and I'm going to snip that. Now, the only thing that you have to solder, you're not soldering back the white back to anything. You haven't snipped any of the ground wires. The only thing you need to solder back to anything is this yellow wire going from the jack, and you need to solder it to the middle lug on the tone pot. So I'm just going to strip the insulation off the end of this wire, give it a twist, and this is just basic soldering stuff. If you don't know how to do that, you know, watch a video or two and figure out how to solder. I'm not the best at it in the world, but you can figure it out. So I'm going to tin the end of the wire here. And then the only thing I have to do, and it's kind of tight. It's tight to get down in here. But I'm going to take this, run it down to the middle lug on the tone pot, and I'm just going to solder it in behind that lug, behind the other one, so I don't accidentally knock off the hot coming from the volumes. So give me just a quiet second here so I don't burn my fingers off. Okay, got that. And that's it. Once you get that solder on, and the both volume pots via the green wire are running to the tone, and the tone via the yellow wire that we just soldered onto the middle lug is now running to the jack. And that's it. You don't need to change any of the ground wires. You don't need to do anything else to the boost circuit. Now, once you get that done and you get everything put back together, which I'm not going to bother doing, I'll just stick it back down here. Once you get all that done, you are going to have a little bit of what could be an aesthetic problem to some people, or maybe even a functional problem, because now you have two volumes, one for the P-bass pickup, one for the jazz bass pickup, and then you have a non-functional knob, and it's the bigger one here. And then you have the tone knob. And I thought to myself when I did this, I thought, well, I'm just going to move the tone, not the knob, but the tone pot up under this now disconnected knob, and that way I'll have volume, volume, tone. I can just leave that last one alone. The only problem you're going to run into with that is that this circuit board is big, and it is not going to fit in the smaller route down here toward the end of the routed out compartment. So you can't really switch those two around very easily. What you could do is just take this entire pot off. You'd have to clip a few more wires here and reground a couple of things, but you could just take that entire pot off, and then you can switch things around wherever you wanted to. Or if you wanted to remove that circuit board from underneath there and move the tone pot to that position, you could also buy one of the front facing jacks, like the one on this Jazz, and put it in the third hole. It'll fit, and then you'd have a standard setup. And of course you'll then have a jack on the side of the guitar that does nothing, but nobody will be able to see that from the front of it. So I'm just planning on leaving it like it is. I'll have volume, volume, skip that one, and I can hook my pinky finger under this to get tone. But if you want it to be more functional, you can switch that stuff around. Well, I hope that helps. I think you'd be surprised how much better these pickups sound when you remove that active boost circuit. And of course, it's a very easy undo if you don't like it. You can always put it back the way it was. All right, well, thanks for watching. I hope you enjoyed. I hope that makes your bass sound a little better if you decide to do it. Keep playing. We'll talk to you later.